All right, hello, this is Wmpyr back again with this book right here. Okay, and so last time I thought it was chapter 1. I was wrong. It was the prologue, and something I missed with the prologue was the part where they're talking about black and white outfits. Okay, so what's interesting is with the black one, the black outfits, he says, okay, both Zen monks and Taoist masters trained themselves by traveling all over the country. When you're traveling all over the country, from a modern point of view, I think, oh, they're on a vacation. But no, they're talking about this is training. Okay, this is like spiritual, physical, mental training is what they were doing by traveling all around. So that's an interesting thing in itself. But so apparently they wore black, and the black is like you're in training. Black is a warrior in training kind of symbolism there. The white outfit, it says, let's see, where is it? Okay, even today, Japanese people wear white in their coffins, following a tradition that holds that they need to be united with gods in white costumes when they cross over to the netherworld. So white is you're communicating to the gods, you're crossing over to the netherworlds. It's for very special when deities are involved. It's not always death, but death is definitely associated with white. Like as a martial artist, if you're wearing white, it's like you've surrendered to death. You're ready for death. So then the white gi, the kimono outfit, kind of makes sense, and it's kind of awesome if you think of it that way. And then, like in a wedding, the bride may wear all white. So then, in that case, you know, it's not that she's surrendering herself to death, but now it's like communicating to the gods type of thing. So, all right, now, after covering that, I could finally go to chapter 1, which is the real Miyamoto Musashi according to the author. So let me keep that in mind, that this is important, that it's according to this author, all right? Now, one of the first things I got to state here is, of course, the real Miyamoto Musashi lived about 450 years ago at the end of the Warring States period. So he was born in combat. Like the nation was, they were warring. Okay, so there were warlords and like I said, kind of like in medieval Europe where you had kingdoms, and so he was born in that. But then as an adult, it says that was ending. So that's also very, very important because you need to know the era. So his era was he was born in war, but then as an adult later on, that war ended. So his, you know, if you think of his life, he was battling, dueling, but then in the end, he wrote the Book of Five Rings. So, you know, he didn't live by the sword, die by the sword. He lived by the sword, and it was the pen at the end. So he was able to make that transition. I think this represents also the era, because at that time they were probably sick and tired of war, and it was ending, so new philosophy was coming out, a more peaceful, a deeper meaning of life kind of stuff. Lots of lives were lost. So this kind of spiritual progression and whatnot. So he was in the middle. It's almost like being born at the right time at the right place. So he was able to see actual war. So he didn't have to theorize about that. I mean, he was involved in some of those battles too. And then now being able to experience real combat, and then also not just the duels, but real combat, but then now being able to see the transition from combat, the aftermath, you know, and I think that's very, very important and interesting. So it says, according to here, one of the things I want to say is, Musashi was unbeaten in no fewer than 66 duels. He was truly a gifted swordsman. So that's just something, I thought it'd be good to mention. So in this book, they mention that, of course, Musashi's style, where he uses two swords, right? One was longer than the other. So he used two swords in combat. The author was quick to point out that Musashi is not the inventor of that. He was not the inventor of fighting with two swords. It was already done before him. And a very, very interesting thing that the author pointed out was Musashi's ancestor was a ninja. It's like, wait, how come I don't hear about this, right? People always talk about Musashi, the great swordsman, this and that. He's a samurai warrior, he's a ronin, all this kind of stuff, right? And from there, you hear about that kind of stuff, but you never hear his ancestor was a ninja, a mysterious ninja that worked for one of the shogun back in the day, Hideyoshi, which is that's like saying, like today, one of the presidents, he worked for, one of one of the older presidents, Abraham Lincoln or whatever, and he was the head of the head spy, the head of CIA or whatever, something like that, maybe not the head, but he was part of that, and so that to me is super interesting. And furthermore, not just that, he said that this dude, okay, there's lots of things I got to mention here, and I got to make sure I don't forget. One of the things that they said was, it's so interesting because in Japan, like I said in the prologue, they talked about how the sword was seen as like a mystical weapon, right? Like it's God related, it's a weapon of legend, right? Just like Excalibur, right? So Japan has that. Okay, so Japan reveres the sword. Okay, so there are other cultures all over the world that do it too. But even though that's true, they still say in this book, it says the spear is the #1 weapon on the battlefield. The spear's #1. So this is actually the same opinion as China. From my understanding, the Chinese martial arts, they're like, what's the best weapon? The spear. Spear's #1 by far. It's #1. They got a million different weapons, some very exotic, very, very cool stuff, but spear's #1. Japan, or at least according to this book, is the same idea. So this ninja ancestor of Musashi carried a spear tip. He carried a spear tip and he used it, he fought with it, and that was kind of like one of his two-handed methods, where he had the sword on one hand and he had the spear tip on the other hand. So to me, that's espada y daga. Wow, I'm blown away. Okay, now on top of that, that spear was a special spear head, right? That spearhead, so if he needed to, he would attach it onto a pole and use it like a conventional spear, but if not, he just carried just the spearhead and he could easily take it out, use it like a dagger, but actually he used it more like what is called a jitte, right? A jitte is a sword catcher. Back in the day in Japan, the police didn't carry a nightstick like today, or basically what is a tonfa, right? A tactical baton, or a collapsible baton is what they carry today, but a little while back, 80s, 70s, 60s, here in the US, they carried almost like a tonfa looking thing. Well, in Japan, they carried a jitte, which is a sword catcher, which makes sense because a lot of the population carried swords. So you would carry this sword catcher, and if you walked around with it, it was one of the things where people could identify you as, oh, that's police. Only police would carry something like that. So this dude who, like I said, he was a ninja, carried this thing, but because he works for the government, maybe he is kind of police-like, I don't know. But he carried this thing, that is very similar to what the police carried, a sword catcher, but you could catch swords on both sides. So the middle is the spear, you know, the like a typical spear where you stab people with, you know, the diamond shape, something like that. And on the sides, it had the catching part, okay? But it was really, really wide. And let me see if I could show you guys. Oh, here it is. Okay. Here you guys go. There you go. Very wide. It almost looks like some kind of crucifix or something, right? So the top part, I said diamond shape. It's not really diamond shaped. It's just pointed right here, and so it's just made for stabbing. But yeah, you can see on this picture really well. And then the sides, or the cross guard, is where you would catch the sword. And this one, it folds up so he could carry it easily. I guess right here you can see it folds up. So this dude invented this thing, and then I guess he was like an expert at it, and he'd carry it. If needed, becomes a full-blown spear. If not, he fought you with a sword and this thing in hand. So double weapons, right? Very interesting. So that was Musashi's ancestor. And then in this book it says Musashi's dad taught Musashi the double sword style. And I was like, really? Because from what I read about Miyamoto Musashi, because I've read several books in the past, from what I read, he fought his own dad, hated his dad, killed his dad. That's what I had heard. In this book, that's not in here. So I don't know. I don't know what's up with that. Like a lot of Musashi stuff is in, you know, legend, folklore, and stuff like that. So that's why in this book, I guess that's why he titled this first chapter "The Real Musashi," right? So that's understandable. The next thing is this right here is the guard, right, on a sword, and this is the Miyamoto Musashi style guard. And they said later on Musashi was trying to make that into a shuriken. He made it. He made the tsuba, that part, into a shuriken. Wait a minute. A shuriken? That's what the ninjas use. It's a throwing star. So he made the guard into a throwing star. That's wild. So he has the sword, and if needed, he'd take it off and toss it. And they said it was more the smaller sword. So it kind of makes sense. The long sword, it would take some time to take it off, maybe. So shorter sword, take it off, use it as a ninja star if you need it. I didn't know Musashi did. Yes, I knew about the double sword. I knew about the wooden sword. But him using ninja stars? And furthermore, in this book, it talks about Musashi doing throwing knives. So that made me feel good, because in the Filipino martial arts that was taught to me, I later broke it down and made the 4 types of weapons, because improvised weapons. I was taught that the skills that I'm learning with the double sticks, I can go to improvised weapons. And when I go to improvised weapons, there are weapon types. And impact weapon, bladed weapon, flexible weapon, and projectile weapon. Projectile means throwing weapon. So that is part of what I learned, and I practice, you know, not a lot, but I do practice because it is part of my art. My style is throwing knives, throwing the stick, throwing things, period. But throwing knife, right? And that's also for me really cool. Is another guy on YouTube, Sensei Rick, who you know, is now going by Video Sensei, and this guy also learned a Filipino martial art, and for him, he's also throwing knives. So I don't know if he was taught to do that necessarily by his instructor, maybe his Filipino martial arts instructor or not, but to him that is part of the knife work, part of his FMA, part of his martial arts, period. But anyway. So yeah, throwing knives. Because when you say shuriken, there's the flat, circular shuriken that's conventional, but then there's also the ones that look more like darts. So it's basically like knife throwing, you know. So that kind of shuriken. So Musashi from this book says basically saying he did both, right? So the two style, look, all this stuff about how do they fight, what kind of techniques they used. This is the kind of stuff you got to go by, all right? This is, guys, that is so hard to understand, you know, the context. A lot of it's just simply not there, you know, and it's very difficult. So it goes into the different styles, and it goes a little bit into Musashi's famous opponent, which in recent times I've seen documentaries and stuff on it. And so Sasaki Kojiro is the famous Musashi's rival, like the famous battle that they had on Ganryujima, which is an island. They went to an island and they fought to the death there, right? And Sasaki Kojiro is a famous guy. Not much is known about that guy, and a lot of things are speculated. But one of the things that is known is that apparently he had an extra long katana sword. It was special for him that I guess he could handle, and he had a secret technique called tsubame gaeshi, and tsubame is sparrow, I think. It's a sparrow reversal, something along those lines. So anyway, this guy, I've heard that the battle between Kojiro and Musashi may not have even taken place. And there's a lot of legend about they did fight, and if they fought, it was like this. Musashi used every dirty trick in the book. He showed up late. He used the sun against them. He used a wooden sword instead of an actual sword. All these tricks that Musashi did is what I heard. Very possible, but then I also heard in real life what probably happened was Musashi and his students, or Musashi's students, probably just jumped the dude, you know, which I don't know. I really have no idea. So it's all in speculation, but according to this book, it sounds like the author really believes that they did meet and they did fight. And so Musashi's technique is, his secret technique is called Tengu Tobi. And look, this is another thing about this book. One of my criticisms is when you put in the Japanese words like Tengu Tobi, for you know, anyone that doesn't speak Japanese, that doesn't mean anything to you guys. You know, it's just, oh, that's a Japanese word, right? Tengu is the yokai, which is the Japanese folklore monster. Like almost like ghost-like. In the West, you could call it like like fairies, Bigfoot. You know, that kind of, it falls into that kind of category. But the Tengu lived in the mountains, and it had wings, it had a long nose, very humanoid, maybe mixed a little bit with like a crow, kind of. And it was a weird monster, and very intelligent and very powerful, whatnot. So Tobi means to jump. So it's this name of that monster, jump technique, right? And so the criticism I have of this book is when you have these kinds of Japanese words in there, you need to put the kanji in there, and then you need to say what it is. Because if not, you're losing. Like, as I'm reading this stuff, half the stuff I know, just because I'm going, it's probably this kanji, and or I just know it, right? And the other stuff, I may not know it, and I'm like, I wonder what the kanji is, because that gives me more context. And that's not in here at all. So I think that the readers in English missing out big time, and that sucks. That's not fair, you know. So the authors should have put that in there. So I'm not happy about that. But the Tengu Tobi, Musashi's secret technique. So you go, whoa, I'm super interested in that. The author basically says we don't know. We really don't know what the heck it is. So he speculates, and this is his speculation, that you are jumping and you hit the guy on the top of the head, kind of thing. But that's the author's own interpretation, okay? And then it goes into some gardens designed by Musashi. These gardens were also like at the temples and stuff. The temples, what I thought was interesting was in wartime, the temples can become like not a fortress, but a place where you could, you know, defend from. And then it talks about Musashi's shuriken jitsu. You see, so that's the more conventional, like a knife-looking shuriken, rather than the one that we typically, when I think of shuriken, you think of the throwing star, the ninja star, but this is also a type of shuriken. So, and then they talk about this battle that Musashi was apparently in, and it was at Hara Castle, where Christian followers, because at the time in Japan, they had let some foreigners in at the time. So we're talking about like from Portugal and stuff, and these people would come in, they spread Christianity, and Japan had allowed that, but then at some point they were like, no, this is a cult, we have to completely ban them, and they freaking, Japan's extreme, so killed them off, and at this battle, that's what happened, and Musashi was involved in that. And then it right here talks about one of the caves where let's see, this where Musashi wrote his book at the end, was the Reigan Cave, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't know that Musashi apparently wrote the Book of Five Rings, and then after that, a year later, he passed away. I didn't know that. And then there's another book. So, of course, this also mentions the Book of Five Rings. But what was it? The other book that he was kind of famous for, Dokodo, The Lone Way. They were saying that the handwriting of that looks similar to Musashi, but they're not sure if Musashi really wrote that or not. So that's kind of interesting. I have no idea what's up with that. So, and that apparently was his last writing right before his death. Maybe he was dying, he knew it, and then he had someone write it for him. Who knows? And another very interesting thing, weapon called kaiken. So this thing that looks like brass knuckles, it says it's a farm tool, so it looks kind of like it has kind of a blade there. Kind of looks like the Alaskan cutter knife used for cooking. But anyway, this thing right here, Musashi apparently slept with this thing. And one of the things the author shows, now I don't know how much of this is author's interpretation, author's sleeping on the sword. So he's using the sword as a pillow, which I can't imagine it's very comfortable, but using the sword as a pillow so the sword's not going to get taken away from you. And then the next thing is he has his arm stuck inside, so he's sleeping like this, and in it he's grabbing this weapon, the kaiken. So he's grabbing this while he's asleep like that, so that he could use that anytime he's attacked. So what I'm learning here from this book, if this book is true, which the author seems very, very confident that what he's presenting here is like foremost authority kind of thing. I get that vibe anyway from this book. But anyway, in this book, what I'm getting is that Musashi, famous swordsman, he went beyond swords. Okay, that he used more than just swords. And even his lineage, his martial arts lineage, like I said, the guy who used a spear tip and a sword, they were doing various weapons, not just limited to the sword. So to me, that is fascinating, and to see that makes sense. Ninja-wise, ninja would fight that way, kind of thing. I would think. Samurai, not necessarily. Yes, they have other skill too, but when it came down to it, I think is just sword or something like that. I would think. Now I could be totally wrong about that, but yeah, maybe in a street situation, a samurai would do whatever it takes, right? Or in war. But if they had sword in hand and they're in a duel, they're probably just going to go with that kind of thing. And Musashi, I guess in a way, brought the street or the war mentality to duels and stuff. So fascinating figure, of course. So anyway, that's chapter 1. Another criticism I have of the book is a big part of it is, I gotta show you, even in chapter 1, it is just tons of this kind of stuff right here, which my brain doesn't work for my brain, you know. So I feel like all this stuff right here, they're trying to show you techniques, and I'm finding this the least helpful, the least interesting part of the book. Just the reading part is I'm blown away by, you know. I'm just finding it extremely fascinating and interesting. And then this part, it just kind of drives me crazy. To me, this is like how not to do things. And that's interesting because back in the day, I would read Black Belt magazine, and probably this was one of my favorite parts of Black Belt magazine is when they're showing you the actual techniques like that. So now I don't know what's the difference. Maybe this is just not done well. I don't know. Or the photos are black and white. It just I don't learn like that, you know. So for me, that is the least interesting part. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that in there. So anyway, that was chapter 1. I'm looking forward to chapter 2 and keep going and going and going. So fascinating book so far. And that's it for now. Thank you for viewing and take care, folks.